Good afternoon, members. We'll make a start. I'm going to ask Eamon to do the summons and take the roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. You're hereby summoned to attend the reconvened meeting of the Planning Committee, which will be a hybrid socially distanced meeting to be conducted remotely via WebEx and also physically in the chamber in the Guildhall on Thursday, the 7th October at 2 p.m. Alderman Breslin.
Alderman Breslin has apologies at the minute. He will be attending later, but he's another thing on just at the start, Eamon.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey. Alderman Hussey. Alderman Kerrigan.
Eamon.
Thank you. Alderman McClintock.
She'll be in later as well. There's a wee bit of technical difficulty with the internet connection.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Barr. Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Angela Dobbins.
Here, Eamon.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
Sure, Eamon.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Logue.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Kieran Maguire. Councillor Maguire. Councillor Philip McKinney. Thank you. Councillor Sean Mooney.
Here.
Thank you. And just another call out. Councillor Hussey. Sorry, Alderman Hussey. And Councillor Maguire. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Eamon. Apologies, we've had apologies. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this is a meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeat viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat box facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystrabane.com. Do we have any declarations from members? Okay, moving on to Chair's business. I was contacted, reference item 12, by the applicant and has asked us to defer it on personal circumstances, for personal circumstances. So I've made the decision we should defer it to next month. Maura would like to speak on the issue of the Greenway. Maura.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to item 15 yesterday, members, I just wanted to update you. We didn't get an opportunity at the end of the session that given the nature of this application, we have to consider the notification procedures to DFI as normal. And in this instance, I have to advise that we would have to consider sending the application to DFI based on the fact that this is a major application and may prejudice the implementation of the local plan, and also in regards to it being a council-owned application and being significantly contrary to the development plan for its district. So in those matters, and also the statutory consultees, we're waiting for them to come back. So I think in terms of consistency and robustness of the decision, we just, as usual, should carry out those notification procedures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Maura. I missed it yesterday, just to welcome Patricia Logue onto the committee. Patricia has plenty of experience on this committee and I'm sure will be very helpful at making decisions. Thank you. Okay, members, the running order for today is 1, 7, 8, 9, 13 and 14. That's 1, 7, 8, 9, 13, and 14. And the first one, number 1, is LA 1120170902F, and Sarah's going to take us through that. Thank you.
Okay, item 1 is LA 1120170902F, and this is a proposed housing development consisting of 97 units, creation of a new access and associated infrastructure and ancillary works. And the site is located at Ballygodden Road to the north and west of number 11 Ballygodden Road, Eglinton, and the recommendation is to approve. This application was deferred on the 4th of March 2020, in June 2020 and July 2020, and the reasons for the deferrals are set out in members' report. So this is the site location plan. The site is located on Ballygodden Road and it is within the development limits of Eglinton on unzoned land as defined in the Dairy Area Plan 2011. It comprises of 2 agricultural fields separated by an existing shop which traverses the site. This is an aerial photograph of the site. The site is defined by a hawthorn hedge and mature trees on its boundaries. Some of the trees in the northern boundary are protected by a tree preservation order, as are the trees located along Ballygodden Road from the site to Main Street. Castle River flows along part of the western boundary. West of the site are existing developments along Mill Path and Brooklyn Park. An existing dwelling abuts the southern boundary in the first field parcel. There are roadside dwellings and agricultural buildings along Ballygodden Road, east and south of the site. So this is a photograph which is a view into the site from Ballygodden Road. And the next photograph is also another view from Ballygodden Road. And in this photograph, you will be able to see the existing dwelling that's located on the southern boundary. This is a photograph of the application site showing the northern boundary. And this next photograph shows the trees along Ballygodden Road, which are protected by a tree preservation order. So in terms of representations, there were a total of 90 objections received throughout the processing of the application, and neighbours were notified on 4 different occasions. So to summarise the issues, these included flooding, road safety and increased traffic, pedestrian safety, impacts on the junction of Ballygodden Road and Main Street, concerns about nature and wildlife, impacts on an area of local nature conservation and amenity importance, loss of character, residential amenity, antisocial behaviour, health impacts, environmental impact assessment determination, archaeology, pollution, infilling of the adjacent site to the application site and enforcement issues, and odour and air quality. And a detailed consideration of the objections is set out in members' report. There were also 11 letters of support received from 9 addresses, and these considered that there would be benefits for the village and first-time buyers. The development will help business and the economy, would be a stronger community, that there is a need for affordable housing in the village to encourage and help local families to stay in the area, considered it was an attractive design and layout, benefits to the local primary school and benefits of the additional footpath and improved junction. So this is the proposed site layout, and as stated, this proposal is for 97 residential units, which will comprise of 4 bungalows, 24 semi-detached 2-storey dwellings, 27 detached 2-storey dwellings, 22-storey terrace dwellings and 22 apartments. And you will note from the proposed site layout that the floodplain extent is now indicated on the layout plan, and there will be no development taking place within the floodplain. This proposal offers a variety of mixed tenure housing, and the site is designed into distinctive character areas. So this is an elevation of the stables, which are starter homes within the development. And the next elevation is Hall House, which is a 3-storey apartment building and apartment block D located within the Central Green area. This is the elevations and floor plans of the apartment block D, which are 4 2-bedroom apartments. An elevation of the retirement bungalows. This is the elevation of the walled garden apartments and a linear block, and the elevations and floor plans of the detached and semi-detached house types. So officers consider the design as acceptable. So as stated, there are a number of TPO trees on the site. So this slide shows a section drawn to demonstrate that works will not impact on the trees which are located on Ballygodden Road. So these trees, some trees are located on the northeastern corner and protected by the tree preservation order, and there are 6 oak trees located along Ballygodden Road. The proposal will require a footpath to be provided from the site to Main Street, Eglinton. Council's tree officer has considered the works, surveys, plans and sections, and it has been demonstrated that the proposal will not impact on the protected trees subject to conditions. DFA Roads have confirmed that they will take on the management and maintenance responsibility for the new 2-metre footway connection from the site to Main Street, given its importance for pedestrian safety. So in terms of consultees, none of the consultees have raised any objections subject to conditions. In considering a policy assessment, this site is located on unzoned land within the settlement limit of Eglinton, and the principle of housing is acceptable on the site. A portion of the western boundary is adjacent to an area of local nature conservation and amenity importance, but the development does not encroach within it. Trees on the northeast corner and 6 trees along Ballygodden Road are protected by the tree preservation order, and trees at the junction of Main Street and Ballygodden Road junction, but the proposals will not impact on the TPO trees, and these will be protected during construction. And considering PPS2, there's been no impact on designated sites or other natural heritage interests. Habitat surveys and BAT reports have been submitted, and Natural Environment Division confirmed that the reports remain valid as the site is unchanged from when the reports were prepared. NED is content the development will not have any impacts on bats, badgers or otters. So this slide just indicates the junction improvements that will be provided at the Main Street and with Main Street and the Ballygodden Road junction, in which there will be a proposed mini roundabout at this junction. So in considering PPS3, the road improvements include a mini roundabout, curb realignment, new road markings, traffic signs for the new roundabout, traffic calming signs and pedestrian crossing island being provided. The existing sightlines at the junction are currently substandard, so this proposal will provide improved sightlines. This is a road safety mitigation measure against the additional vehicular impact generated by the proposal. There will also be a footpath connection from the site to Main Street along Ballygodden Road, and the existing 30-mile-per-hour speed limit sign will be relocated to the southern extent of the development. There's adequate and safe access into the site provided with sightlines of 4.5 by 90 metres. DFI Roads have no objections subject to conditions. In considering PPS 6, there has been demonstrated that there will be no impact from the proposal on the rectory, which is a Grade B listed building located on Main Street. Historic Monuments Units also considered an archaeological impact assessment and have no objections. The design and layout and character are all considered appropriate, and the proposal meets the criteria of QD1 of PPS 7. Open space has been provided within 7 different amenity areas, and this includes a central green area with an equipped play area and a large area of open space at the western boundary adjacent to Castle River. So the next slide will show you the strategic flood map, Northern Ireland, and the latest site layout. And it will be noted that no development is to take place within the floodplain. DFA rivers and officers have considered all of the representations received. A flood risk assessment and drainage assessment, addendums and further information were submitted from the agent and submitted to DFA rivers. As stated, part of the site is within the floodplain. However, the development, roads, gardens are all situated outside the floodplain. A portion of the open space amenity area is within the floodplain. However, this is permitted under policy. All finished floor levels, including gardens, footways and carriageways, are outside the floodplain, and these also incorporate an additional 600mm freeboard above the 1 in 100-year floodplain level, and also takes into account the climate change levels. A maintenance strip is provided to the watercourse which traverses the site, and this has been retained and incorporated into the development. And considering surface water runoff, a detailed drainage design has been submitted that confirms that surface water runoff rates are restricted to greenfield rates, and this will be contained within the network by oversized pipes and hydro breaks located upstream from discharge point. DFI rivers have confirmed they have no objections to the proposal. So in summary, this proposal meets all the relevant planning policy. Officers consider the proposal as acceptable, and the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Okay, we have some speakers wishing to speak on this item. And the first one to speak will be Gillian Simpson on behalf of the objectors. Ms. Simpson.
Thank you. There are many flaws with this application, the design and indeed the planning process, but I only have 5 minutes, so I will prioritise. I speak on behalf of residents of Eglinton who are opposed to this application. These residents live either across the river from the proposed development or downstream of it. Many were impacted directly by the 2017 flood. We have consulted with an ex-planning officer and a flood specialist from Trinity College Dublin. Whilst the EIA screening determination provided by officers records potential flooding as a likely environmental effect of the project, it goes on to state that the environmental effects are not significant. Given the significant flooding event of 2017, we would refute this assessment and request that the application goes to full EIA. There are 2 mitigations detailed in the EIA screening for the benefit of the properties in the development: a 600 mil freeboard and no development in the floodplain. However, if there is any doubt over the effectiveness of the mitigations to prevent likely significant environmental effects, for example, serious flooding, then the fallback position should be to require a full EIA. Given that the competent authority, DFI Rivers, last updated their flood maps in December 2020, which was before the removal of the majority of soil in the unfilled floodplain, which sits between the river and the proposed development, are members even confident that the floodplain has been accurately determined? How do we know for sure that these houses are not being built on the floodplain? Such is the significant flood risk in Eglinton that Minister Mallon's department, DFI Rivers, propose a flood alleviation scheme, which includes building a flood defence to protect the properties on the Millpath side of the Castle River. Floodwaters would effectively move away from the Millpath and towards this proposed development. In the field below the site, the river is being rechanneled into it, again pushing floodwaters closer to the properties on the proposed development. Surely it would be prudent to take a precautionary approach and wait until the flood alleviation scheme is implemented, or even assess the proposed flood alleviation scheme if it will have a knock-on effect on the site or vice versa. This and the effects of climate change were raised by objectors, but we don't feel were fully addressed in the planner's report. Would it not be precautionary to wait also until the enforcement action is complete on the unfilled floodplain? Would it not be precautionary to wait until DFI confirms the ground levels on the unfilled floodplain when the enforcement notice is complied with? It is our understanding that the ground levels have been taken by a private business who's been paid for and is acting on behalf of the developer, and that this data is being used for the basis of decision making. The ground level should be taken by the competent authority, DFI Rivers, and the flood risk model rerun. At least then there would be impartial confirmation of the spread of the 1 in 100 year floodplain. I draw your attention to the application for 164 houses at Drummahoe and the application for 3 related housing developments at Ardmore, where deficient EIA determinations were carried out by planners, ruling out significant environmental effects, thus negating the requirement of a full EIA, only later to have that decision overturned. What assurances can members have that planners have got it right in this instance? A wider concern is why these matters are still arising now after the application was presented for approval to planning 18 months ago. The Habitat Regulation Assessment Report is dated the 22nd of August 2017 and is now over 4 years old. Since then, there have been significant changes to the site. There's been a major flood event with the river bursting its banks, and there's been the significant movement of land as a result of the enforcement action being undertaken by planning. The movement of land impacted a native hedgerow on the western boundary of the site. Hedgerows are a known habitat and food source for protected species such as hedgehogs, badgers, birds and red squirrels. Since the flooding event, invasive plant species such as Japanese knotweed have also been identified in the locality. The assessment was undertaken during one site visit in April 2017 and clearly states that some species could have been missed. The survey also states that the presence or absence of protected species, usually requires multiple visits at suitable times of the year, and clearly states the report cannot be considered as a comprehensive assessment of the site's ecological interest. Bat survey was also submitted in August 2017, and it states that bats are mobile and transient, moving to new areas throughout the season. It states further surveys may be required to safeguard bat species on the site should there be a delay in development of 24 months. 48 months have now passed. Only recently did councillors back a motion recognising the rights of nature and a commitment for this keystone concept to be integrated into council operational practices, planning processes and long-term decision making. Are members happy to make a planning decision today with the long-term impacts based on an assessments that are now 4 years old? Whilst this application on paper, and there is a lot of paper, may appear to tick all the boxes, in reality it doesn't. In reality, it puts existing residents at increased risk of flood. We can't change our freeboard to 600 mil. I urge members to see the bigger picture, to consider the cumulative effect of other developments, existing pressures in the village and climate change. In 2014, the then Minister of the Environment, Mark H. Durkan, stated in the Northern Ireland Climate Change Adaptation Programme, "We don't need more words, we need more action. Now is the time to act, to think beyond the current benchmarks. With climate change, significant flood events are likely to become bigger and more frequent. We can't keep building on every green space of land just because it was zoned in the Derry Area Plan in 2011. In fact, on page 7, under the purpose of the plan, it states it's to be used as a guide for development up to the year 2011. We're well past 2011 now. We must
Excuse me, Gillian, I'm sorry, you're
2 sentences to finish off. We must respect the rights of nature, the environment, and listen to the voices of the community who stand firmly against this application for the protection of people, existing homes, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, questions for the objector, please? Angela?
I thank you, Chair. Now, Chair, I'm having a wee bit of bother with internet. So, Chair, I would like to ask the objector. I know your name's Gillian. That was all I caught. Gillian, could you elaborate, please, on the concern with regard to flooding, and if you could, in your view, what is the enforcement there? I was sort of catching it a bit in and out, so if you could elaborate on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem, Angela. There is enforcement action underway on a strip of land that runs between the proposed development on the western boundary of the site. This strip of land was infilled and had significant impacts on the flooding event that happened in 2017. Since then, that land has been removed. We don't know if it's back to the level of it was before. We're waiting on confirmation from enforcement to see if they can take ground levels, to see if it's been returned to what it was so that it can function as a floodplain again. Our concern is that the ground levels that are included in this planning application have been assessed by a private business and not by the competent authority. And we would ask that this planning decision is held off until the competent authority takes the ground levels, and that would be after the enforcement notice is fully complied with.
Thank you for that. Angela, answer your question.
Yes. Can I just one more small one? It's on the same thread. Gillian, are you saying that the assessment for the flooding or the potential risk for flooding was done before or after this mound was levelled? Thank you, Gillian.
Angela, there has been an updated flood risk assessment submitted on behalf of the developer. Initially, they were using Rivers Agency ground level, but we pointed out that those ground levels weren't accurate anymore. Rivers Agency confirmed that their ground levels were taken before the majority of the soil and the infilled floodplain was removed, and that they don't have the current ground levels of the floodplain. So in our mind, that states then that the floodplain really had, the 1 on the 100-year floodplain really hasn't been determined properly. So the developer has submitted ground levels that have been taken by McCloy's consultants. So ground levels have been taken by a private business who's been paid for by the developer. We don't feel that that is impartial, and we would ask that it is held off until the enforcement notice is fully complied with, because even the ground levels as they are now, they may change to fully comply with the enforcement notice. So at the minute that those levels are not finished because the enforcement notice hasn't fully been complied with.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gillian.
Councillor John Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. Hey, Gillian, thanks for joining us. Gillian, you mentioned, I know you were trying to get an awful lot of information in there, so I was able to follow most, perhaps not all of it. And it's kind of the reason why I asked the question. So if it sounds like a stupid question, it's because I'm not sure I picked it all up right. You mentioned a flood alleviation scheme or some suggestion of a flood alleviation scheme. Could you outline some of the detail around that for me, if that would be possible?
No problem.
As I said, it's real, but if you approach it from the perspective that I know nothing about it and it's news to me, and it might make it easier for you to explain it to me, I suppose.
No problem. So after the 2017 flood, Rivers Agency, I think the original company was called ACOM. They came out and they did a public information event in the community hall. And at that stage, they had outlined concepts for what the flood alleviation scheme could look like. At the minute, or up until quite recently, it had moved on to the ground investigation stage. So there is a realization that there is a bottleneck for the two rivers that run through the village, the Castle River and the Muff River. The Castle River is the one that we are concerned with because it's closest to this development. So Rivers Agency are looking at putting in measures to alleviate that bottleneck and to protect the properties that are already here. That includes an embankment down the Mill Path side of the river. It also included re-channeling the river out into what we would call the church field, which is just the field below this development. And there was also further re-channeling down in St. Canice's Park. And these were measures that Rivers Agency felt were needed in order to alleviate the flood risk in the village. There's also measures on over on the other side of the village as well, but I think these are the maybe ones that you'd be most interested in.
Just go ahead.
So just to be straight about this, Gillian. So the flood alleviation scheme that was discussed at that public meeting is a flood alleviation scheme for, I suppose, the entirety of the village and the areas that were subject to flooding way back in the summer of whatever year that was. I can't even remember. August. I remember it being in August anyway. And I suppose that the question I'm asking myself in my own head is, well, that flood alleviation scheme would still need to be done whether these houses are built or not. Would that not be the case?
The point I was making, John, is that the flood alleviation measures that are being proposed would push floodwaters towards this development. We would also have concerns about the sequencing of events. If this development goes ahead, it might restrict the alleviation schemes that can be put into place, which would put, it may then rule out the possibility of implementing a scheme.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gillian. Before I ask a question of Gillian, Chair, I'd like to ask a question of our legal advisor, Philip. I mean, Gillian referred there to the 5-minute limitation, which obviously curtailed for input. Can I ask Philip, when I ask my question, is there any limitation on the time that is allowed to the respondent?
Chair, Chair, through you, the protocol doesn't make any provision for a restriction in the length of time associated to the answering of questions. It then becomes down to a matter of the balancing of the committee's requirement.
Can I just stop you there? We're hearing a bit of an echo. Must have your speaker on your tablet.
I'm okay with that, Chair. I think I've heard what Philip had to say clearly.
Yeah, just the final point I was going to make is that it becomes a matter of balancing the need to get the business of the committee done against the need to ensure that all relevant and material information is presented to the committee.
I appreciate that, Chair. If I can go ahead and address Gillian with a quick question. I mean, Gillian, in your initial presentation, you did allude to the fact that there were many issues around this particular application and that you had to limit your input with regard to this particular application. My question might allow you to, to fully inform the committee as we need to be informed with regard to the particular application. What are those other issues that are of concern to you as residents that you have not already alluded to? And by the way, the flood issue with regard to the floodplain that Councillor Boyle was alluding to, I fully appreciate where you're coming from there, because if you close off water from one place, it has to go somewhere. But your point there with regard to the many issues, I'd like to hear what those issues are. So I'm asking you, what are they? Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that I speak on behalf of a group of people who have different experiences and knowledge, and I'm just only one representing, so I will try and cover some of the ones. We would have concerns around the sort of accumulative development that's happening in the village. There's been 7 single dwellings approved for planning along the just in the Ballygodden Road in the last 8 or 10 years. The lower Ballygodden Road has had 9 properties approved. That's a development on its own. There's a planning application and for 11 properties beside this development. There's 97 properties in this development, and then there's another planning application, we believe, underway between the DIY and the Presbyterian Church. The draft local development plan states that Eglinton has seen the greatest growth in terms of housing, and we would just have concerns about the size of the village. In the morning, I queue to get out of the village onto the main road to head and to work, and in the evening I queue to get back in again. And with all these developments and the average house having 2 cars now per household, we would have concerns about the impacts on parking in the village. There is not enough parking in the village, and if this is more housing, that will add to that. And we'd have concerns about a roundabout in the middle of what is defined as a historic village. We've got concerns about odour. The proposed development is in close proximity to established horse stables and a working farm. It's also bordered by fields that have been identified for the spreading of slurry, completely surrounded, and slurry can be sprayed on fields between February and October. So we would have concerns around the odour. The odour assessment for this housing development doesn't include a milking parlour and slurry pit that's currently going through a retrospective planning application. So therefore, we are concerned and not satisfied that a full and comprehensive assessment of all the cumulative generating sources for odour and noise have been carried out. With regard to odour, we also reference another planning application for a smaller development that was proposed, and it was refused on the grounds of odour and noise. Now it sits right beside where this proposed development is going. The mitigation that the developer proposed was to warn future occupants of the odour, but this was determined not to be sufficient. Yet that is exactly what is being proposed for this development, which is concerning. And we just go back to our concerns about flood and drainage. And the drainage is a separate issue from the river flooding, and we would have concerns about the drainage system. It's well known that homeowners in new developments, they buy the house to their limits, and later on they extend their driveway, they add patios, they add conservatories, they add garages. Can the drainage system that is being proposed for this development cope with what we would call development creep? Can the attenuation tanks return the rainwater at its current rate back into the river system? So all these hard surfaces, driveways, patios, conservatories, all these things that will get added on over the years to come will expedite the water's exit from that site into the river, and that would put pressure on residents downstream, particularly those in St. Canice's. If we read it right too, we also believe that the drainage system hasn't been adopted by Northern Ireland Water, but I think that's the norm. But if they don't adopt it, then the developer has to provide the maintenance for that ongoing. And I note the conditions are to ongoing maintenance, cyclical checking of flow controls and devices, clearing of debris after flooding events, visual inspection of the attenuation tanks with blockages and obstructions being removed before they pose a risk to properties. Is this really sustainable if it's not adopted by Northern Ireland Water? And just to finish off on DFI's latest response to the flood risk assessment, it says it should be brought to the attention of the applicant that the responsibility for the accuracy of the flood risk and drainage assessment, and the implementation of the proposed flood measures rests with the developer. So whilst Rivers Agency don't have the current ground levels for us to accurately determine what the flood risk assessment is and where the floodplain is, they are putting that onus back onto the developer, and I suppose it's down to committee to vote if that is acceptable or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions for the objector? Okay, we have speakers on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Chris Bryson and Kyle Somerville. Gentlemen, you have 5 minutes between you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Bryson from Gravis Planning. We are the agents for the proposal, and I'll be speaking in favour of the application. We fully endorse and agree with the officer's recommendation to committee to approve this proposal. This application has been under consideration for over 4 years now, and every aspect of it has been scrutinised in great detail by not only council officers but also statutory consultees. We are fully engaged with council officers on the project right from the pre-application stage through to today's recommendation in order to try and address all issues and concerns in a timely manner. And as you've heard from officers, all relevant statutory bodies and consultees have no objections to the proposal. I'll turn now to some of the issues raised by Ms Simpson and try to provide some clarity for members on those. Obviously focused primarily on the flooding aspect of it. Members should be aware that no evidence has been submitted by any third party or objector to dispute or challenge the reports that we've submitted, and indeed DFI Rivers have endorsed the conclusions. In the absence of any evidence that what we've done is wrong, the members must weigh our submissions accordingly. I have with me Kyle Somerville from McCloy Consulting, who can answer any detailed queries members may have after I'm speaking. But suffice to say that we're confident that the flood risk assessment is policy compliant and that has been endorsed by the relevant statutory agencies. Reference was also made in terms of infilling of land. Again, just to clarify, members, that land is outside the application site, and therefore any action on it can't be associated with this application. Nevertheless, to provide clarity to Rivers Agency and the council, we have surveyed this site and have modelled it in accordance with DFI Rivers' request. And I have to say, and Kyle will perhaps speak in this as well, I take offence at the insinuation that the accuracy of that modelling and levels is called into question. McCloy Consulting are a professional organisation, and I don't think they would take kindly to any accusations of inaccuracy. That's really all I have to say. Members, happy to take questions on this and any aspect of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fad. Members, any questions for the applicant? Councillor Boyle.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Chris. I think you said your colleague's name was Kyle. This may well be one for Kyle to answer. I'm not sure. You can take your pick. And I am conscious of the fact that the infill that was referenced is outside of the red line, so to speak. But I would appreciate some detail around, and again, I would not wish to cast any aspersions on anyone's professional opinion or ability. It's more for the matter for the committee to understand what that modelling meant when you took into consideration the removal of the infill or the slag heap. I mean, anybody who was on the site visit will have seen it. I saw it myself. It was quite substantial and very high. I know it obviously has been enforced, and to the best of my knowledge has been removed. But I'll come back to officers on that element, I suppose. But some explanation of the modelling and how it might be that we could understand that it works and will ensure that there is no further flood inundation. it's a convoluted way of asking a very straightforward question, I suppose, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yes, thank you, Councillor, and we'll reply through the chair. Just before Kyle comes in, obviously, although the site is outside the application site, we have endeavoured to help the council and DFI Rivers understand that area. And like I said, we have gone in and surveyed it, and maybe Kyle can go into greater detail on that.
Yep, sorry, happy to. So just for full context, DFI Rivers updated its own internal river models after the northwest flooding in 2017. That was to take into account the more extreme, the extreme event in 2017 and how it influenced the estimates of the 1% or 100-year flood. So then they published their new maps. I think they were dated in December 2020. It was then apparent that the material between the site and the Castle River had been removed. So the applicant instructed a third-party surveying contractor, a reputable third-party surveying contractor. They surveyed the land earlier on this year. In terms of how we build that into the river model, we licensed River's own model and use the same software they use it. Now that model is a function of applying the flows and the geometry, the landforms. So basically what we're able to do is patch on that area of changed ground levels into the overall model ground levels and then re-simulate without making any other changes. And that produces a revised flood extent. And the outcome is really there was a very slight change to flood extent on the site, no material effect, but that has been catered for by a revised layout to ensure that all development is still outside that revised floodplain. We've supplied data to DFI Rivers to compare the surveyed ground levels, which are reflective of the removed scenario. And there is LiDAR, which is it's high resolution, highly accurate data that predates, we understand predates the placement of that material, or at least substantial placement of that material. We've been able to compare those and show that the levels are as they would have been previous to land raising within normal standards. So as we are very content with the work that we've done. And just to follow on from Chris's point, I'm a chartered engineer. We're bound by ethical standards. I would not accept any accusation that we've acted unethically or tried to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. This is robust and in accordance with best available techniques.
Hold on one second, Councillor Boyle. I should just point out as well, we have Neil Jenkins online here as well from DFI Rivers for any technical questions you wish to have. Go ahead, Councillor Boyle.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Kyle, and absolutely. I don't think anybody would ever suggest that your work is not to the standard that we would all expect. This is a straightforward yes, no answer. And from that, then I understand that the surveys that you've carried out have been carried out. Question is, they were carried out after the removal of the infill. That's the case. And so therefore, the information we have in front of us today, and again, I'm sure officers will be taking a note of that, as the latest and most up-to-date information in relation to the flooding that might or might not occur after the removal or the enforcement and the removal of the infill. So is it a yes or no? Yeah, this is the latest up-to-date since that happened, yeah?
Yes, that is correct.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kyle. Very useful. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Any more questions for the applicants? Okay, any questions for the officer? Councillor Boyle?
Well, it's just to come back on that matter. So if officers can confirm for us as well, not that I don't believe Kyle. There was also mention of bats and bat surveys and stuff. So I would again, and quite a lot of what was discussed already and raised through the questions that Alderman Hussey afforded the objector as on the report. I understand all of that as well. But if we could come back to the issue of the bats, what consideration was given to the potential flood alleviation scheme and what, if anything, what relevance that might have. As I said, the surveys that you have are the most up to date? Again, that's a straightforward yes or no.
Okay, through the chair. In relation to the ecological surveys that were carried out, officers, this had been raised as an issue within the objections that the objectors considered that the reports were out of date. So officers contacted and reconsulted with Natural Environment Division. So NED, as part of DERA, have confirmed to officers that given that there was no change on the site, that everything more or less is still the same from when they were initially assessed, that they were content that the reports were valid, and they had no objection and were content with the reports as submitted. In relation to the flood alleviation scheme, I will have to bring Neil Jenkinson in to discuss that with you. And then your third question was in relation to the flood modelling that's taken place. Yes, the latest flood risk assessment that was carried out is up to date, and it is based on the levels following in full removal from the adjacent site. And just to point out again, I suppose officers would stress that, you know, there is no development within the floodplain as part of this application proposal.
Neil, can you come in and just speak on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. The flood alleviation scheme, there were no, the feasibility for flood alleviation scheme didn't show any flood alleviation works in the field that is, or within the red line. There was, as Ms. Simpson said, works planned on the other side of on the left bank at the back of Mill Path. I have made those who are project managing the flood alleviation scheme aware of the development and the potential for it to take place and the potential for it to increase the level of land that is outside the estimated floodplain. And they're aware that, I mean, if putting in a flood defence pushes water in the direction of the new development would have to have equal protection to the existing development. I don't know if that, hope that answers your question, Councillor Byrne.
Councillor Boyle.
Or Boyle, pardon me.
You're fine. You're okay. The audios aren't great sometimes, Neil. There's one back to the officers then, just for my own understanding. I mean, the infill wasn't there forever, so when was it put there? And obviously we know when it was removed, but when was it put there? Because I suppose the reason I asked that question is that if it's been removed, then the land will have been, it's back to where it was before it was there, if you know what I mean. So have we any idea of how long that infill was there? But I think that's pertinent in relation to, perhaps pertinent in relation to previous flooding events. I might only be able to speculate on that.
Yeah, through the chair. I don't know the exact date that the infill was put on the site, but would have been there prior to the flood event in 2017. So there has been enforcement action taken and court action taken for the removal of that. It's my understanding from the enforcement team that some of the infill, unauthorised infill, has been removed, but they have to carry out the surveys to make sure that it's pre-levels that would have been there prior to the unauthorised infill taking place. I just don't have an exact date as to when that infill was done. I don't know if Neil's aware of that.
Neil, if you'd like to maybe perhaps answer that question, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, Andre, I don't know exactly when it was put there, but as you say, it was there in August 2017. And as was pointed out earlier, had an impact on the flooding. But I would only be giving you a guess almost. I think from looking at orthophotography in the past, I didn't check the site before it came on. It was in around 2015. It came in, and Gillian Simpson would know better than any of us, I'm sure.
Okay, Councillor Angela Dobbins.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's just a question with regard to that, and I'm not going to read back and forth again, but I'd heard there that some of the protections that are already in place in other areas with against flooding should be done by the developer. I don't see it in the plans. Can I ask the officer, is there protection for potential flood risk for these new houses, for this development? Because God forbid we ever get back to 2017 again, and the way that Eglinton was affected by flood. I'm not convinced that like talking about this info, and I've heard, oh, it's been taken away, and then I've heard some has been taken away, and I would question the levels now, and I do not for one instance question the integrity of the private person who had actually done the assessment, but you know, if you're starting off somewhere and you need 10 foot, but you could be 2 foot above, you know, the beginning at the start. So that's what's worrying me, Chair, and I would really need good clarification on that.
Just before the officer comes in here, can I make a point? Ms. Simpson's putting comments in the chat box. I'd ask members to please disregard it and ask Ms. Simpson to stop doing that. Thank you. Could you clarify what the question is, Councillor Dobbins?
I am questioning this infill place, or this infill that was done, and I heard at the beginning that it has been removed, and now the officer has said some of it's been removed. So I'm worried that the actual measurement for flood risk is wrong to begin with, and therefore this area could be potentially at a high flood risk. And the flood risk protection that has been put on an area adjacent to the site, it was recommended there that the developer do equally, you know, the flood protection. I don't see this in the plans, so I would like assurances that I would like assurances from the officer that they have approached the developer with regard to this, and would there be flood protection put into these houses, like the adjacent areas?
Thank you, Councillor Dobbins, but I think this is a question really for the officer and for the DFI Rivers representative. The answer.
Yeah, I just need an answer, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Through the chair, with regards to the infill, the unauthorised infill is on land outside of the application site. It is on land adjacent to the Castle River, which is situated between the Castle River and the application site, and what would have been defined as part of the floodplain originally. So whenever the unauthorised infill took place and the 2017 event happened, there was issues raised that the floodwaters couldn't disperse into the floodplain, but it did not increase flooding into the application site. The application site and the flood maps that are available from DFI Rivers indicate the existing floodplain. So we are aware that some of the infill material has been removed from the site. However, enforcement officers have not carried out a survey of the levels to ensure that they are pre-infill levels at this stage. But the surveys that have been carried out by the applicant team and their consultants, and which have been then forwarded to DFI Rivers, our advice from our statutory consultees are that they are satisfied that the development as proposed in this application will not be affected by flooding. However, there has been, I suppose, an extra assurance that the houses can have a freeboard of an extra 600 mil, and that's just a precaution But we are satisfied that the floodplain as defined in the maps, all development on this application is outside of that area. I hope that answers the question for you.
You okay
So-
with that, Councillor Doyle?
So in a nutshell then, Chair, DFA were satisfied, with the findings of someone that they don't normally use, but somebody else who was actually working on behalf of the applicant. That's confusing.
Can I ask Mr. Jenkins to come in there, please?
Thank you, Chair. For consultants working on behalf of applicants to define or redefine in some places floodplains is commonplace. What Kyle explained earlier was that McLeod Consulting have licensed the model that we used to define the floodplain ourselves, and the only thing they changed about that model was they took out the infilled ground to the level that it was when the survey was taken on May this year. They remodeled the floodplain, and we are content that what they have produced is accurate. If we were to do a remodel of the floodplain today, we would do the same thing that they have done. We would use the same information. We probably would go out and survey it ourselves, but there's nothing unusual or worthy of suspicion in what has been produced. In fact, far from it. And in terms of flood risk to the houses that are being built, as Andrea points out, there will be freeboard. Freeboard has been indicated on the drawings to finished floor levels in excess of 600 millimeters. And that is how future proofing against flood risk is provided for new development. That again is commonplace.
Thank you for that. I have questions from Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Neil, Kyle, and Chris. I think I don't know. I really have concerns around the flooding issue, and anyone who lives near to flood protection measures that are introduced realizes that it does push water somewhere else. The water doesn't disappear; it has to go somewhere else. I have this image of Archimedes getting into a bath as well, and shouting Eureka whenever we tell of materials being added, infill, and then that being taken out, and I have concern when I hear that officers are saying that the determination is made on the existing floodplain. There are other things which are going to impact on this, and which will impact on the floodplain. And I'm minded at this moment in time to be precautionary, and I'm asking the three gentlemen, whether it's Neil, Kyle, or Chris, can somebody explain to me where the precautionary nature has come in to the application? Thank you.
That question would have to go to Neil Jenkinson, I would believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Policy FLD1 states that there's presumption against development within the 1 in 100 year fluvial floodplain. And that floodplain is defined as it's depicted on flood maps NI. That's stated both in PPS 15 and in the SPPS. Currently, the flood maps NI indicate that the site is outside the 1 in 100 year floodplain. We had concerns because we knew material had been removed from the model that we had created. So we asked the planning authority to ensure that the developer had it remodeled. The developers had it remodeled, and we accept that floodplain, and the site is still outside the 1 in 100 year fluvial floodplain, and therefore complies with policy. In terms of precautionary approach, 600 millimeters of freeboard provided to the proposed development, finished floor levels. And if the flood alleviation scheme increases flood risk to the development, then the flood alleviation scheme will have to accommodate or mitigate for that risk, would be the better term. But in terms of putting the development there, the flood outside the floodplain, the development in itself being placed there does not increase flood risk elsewhere from a fluvial flood risk perspective. Don't know if that is helpful.
Okay,
Back
Alderman
very
Hussey.
Very briefly, fair enough, you're allowing this 600 mil, I suppose that's 2 foot no old money, rise within particular developments, but that does not account for the surrounding land and gardens and all of the rest that goes with a home. I still have concerns, but I accept what you're saying, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
Thank you. I think on the report it indicates it's 600 mil is finished floor level, gardens and footpaths as well, of the surrounding areas of the building. So I think that should alleviate Councillor Hussey's concerns. Chair, it's a very in-depth report, and at the end of this report, there's very in-depth conditions that are placed upon us, and I think that a lot of those conditions goes to addressing a lot of the concerns that were raised. And alongside that, the statutory consultations that have come back go a long way addressing those issues. And we talk about amenities are getting protected, there's runoffs, there's extra 600 mil across the site, floodplain getting protected. There's a lot, probably over and above that normal circumstances of applications coming in. So, Chair, on the balance of fairness and policy compliant, I would like to propose that we go with the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gallagher. We have Councillor Minnie wishes to speak.
Sorry, Chair, just briefly, I'll not keep the committee's time, but on the basis of the previous discussions about the evidence, and it seems to be expert evidence, I was just wanted to clarify with officers, did objectors or anybody raise objections? Did they supply any expert evidence on their own behalf about the floodplains? I know that we've been told that there was reports by the applicants, and obviously the statutory consultees were obviously present and they reported on this, but just for my own purpose, I mean, they were offered obviously they could have sent in their own expert evidence, but did they, or did they get the opportunity to do it? Thank you, Chair.
The objections were received were just detailed objections. There was no evidential reports accompanying the objections.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I've a couple of questions for officers. I know there's a proposal already on the floor, but I think I had been to speak before that. Thank you. So just a couple of things to clarify, which would be useful. Just looking at the site layout map that's provided on page 86, the top centre of that map is overlaid in blue along the Ballygodden Road, where access works are proposed. I'm just wondering, is that blue indicative of floodplain? If that could be clarified. Also, at page 96, there's a reference to the 10% open space requirement being at least partially within the floodplain on that site. I'm just wondering, in terms of future flooding and future proofing, who takes responsibility for decontaminating that open space land that's within the 10% on site. We've seen a lot of issues post 2017, including council facilities where amenity lands have actually been permanently left unusable due to contamination. And just then on page 98, DFI Rivers have requested that the maintenance of access strips is there for in perpetuity with no trees or fences or anything installed, but I don't see anything in terms of future building development not being specified on that list. And I'm just wondering, is there a barrier then if this was approved to future in curtilage development, sort of extensions and such like? That could be clarified, Chair. Thank you.
Also, like to comment.
Through the chair, I'll try and pick up on all the comments there. I think the first one that was raised by Councillor Kelly was the site layout plan and the area shaded in blue, which is in the top north of the site along Ballygolden Road. So that area is outside the application site. That site is just immediately north of the application site. That is defined as partially floodplain or surface water floodplain potentially, but it's really not relevant to the current application site. In relation to your open space query, although there is open space within the floodplain, this is permitted under policy and it's also calculated within the percentage requirement for PPS 8. You'd raised a query about if this part of the site flooded, who would basically be responsible for the management of that. So there's a condition proposed that an open space provider would take on all responsibility for the open space management for this entire site. And the third point I think that was raised was in relation to the maintenance strips. So there's a maintenance strip required to the water course that traverses the site. The maintenance strip is not within any curtilage for development. However, officers have put a proposed condition on that there would be no tree planting within that maintenance strip, so that there would be that is kept clear from any development or tree planting or change in levels, so that it is easy accessed if it needs to be maintained. So I hope those answers your questions.
Are you happy with those answers, Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, we have a proposal on the floor here do you have a seconder, Mr. Gallagher? Okay. Okay, we have a proposal on the floor. We have to accept the officer's recommendation. We go to a vote, please, Eamon.
Thank you, Chair. Alderman Breesland.
I wasn't done for the whole, so I'm not eligible to vote.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey.
Still not convinced. Reference the flooding issue against.
Alderman Kerrigan.
I'll go for it, Eamon.
Thank you. Alderman McClintock.
I wasn't in at the beginning, so can't vote.
Thank you. Councillor Barr.
Wasn't in from the start, so can't vote.
Thank you. Councillor John Boyle. Thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins.
I'm not convinced with regard to flooding, so no.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Like others, I'm not convinced in relation to the flooding.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
Against, Eamon.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Logue.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Philip McKinney.
Against.
Councillor Sean Mooney.
Against.
Thank you. The vote is 4 for and 6 against.
The recommendation falls. Yes, sorry. Thanks for keeping us right, Andre. Right. We need a proposal to reject the officer's recommendation. Proposer and seconder.
Chair, thank you for allowing me in, and I can understand the committee's concerns, and because this is a very difficult application. All of us are familiar with the events that happened in August 2017 and the sensitivities around that and how people's homes had been devastated. And whenever I appreciate the reports that have been presented to us today. I appreciate all the information that's contained within it, and the information that was that we heard from the applicant and the agent. But despite all of that, I haven't had enough assurances that this application isn't going to result in an increase in flooding. The future residents of this development won't be impacted by flooding. And I really, really want to support an application. There's a tremendous housing need in Eglinton, and this is housing land. But we want the assurances that people that are going to be living in developments aren't going to be at risk of flooding. And to date, I haven't been given that assurance. In the same token, I haven't been able to have a firm policy position to overturn the officer's recommendation. So I can understand the sort of the catch-22 that the committee's in, but I just wanted to express my reasons for not supporting the proposal from Councillor Gallagher, because genuinely I want to see development. I know there's a massive need for housing in Eglinton, and but it's just in terms of getting the assurances that the relevant protection is going to be there for future residents, and I haven't got it. Doesn't help, Chair, but I just wanted to provide that clarity for my own position.
Anna Jackson, I much appreciate that. I would probably agree with your sentiments completely. Having lived in Eglinton many, many years ago, I understand the people's concerns, especially in that area. I do agree we do need housing within the whole district. Desperate for it. Okay, we're going to move on to, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, look, I'm planning, said it before, we put stuff through the mincer, take it apart and put it back together again. And we do that in an attempt at trying to be very balanced. And when applications come forward, we have to be balanced and fair. There's things that are subjective, there are things that are not, there are things that are clear. And then there's also policy that is clear. And applicants, when they're coming forward, are asked to adhere to policy. And an application has come forward that's adhering to policy. and it goes above and beyond. And planners also place conditions. And they place conditions on for a number of reasons: protecting amenities, protecting the environment, protecting people, protecting land, all that stuff. It's put in order to secure, to secure as much as possibly can be seen into the future that an application is sound. This application coming forward here is sound. People might be convinced of it, but it's sound and it's policy compliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your comments, sir, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Completely concur with Councillor Gallagher. That's what we're here for. And you know, there's quite a number of times when a planning application is a bit of a balancing act. But to my mind, it's sound as well. I agree with Councillor Gallagher. But Chair, I'll draw you back to a statutory requirement that this committee, as I understand it, and the city solicitor will be able to support this. If this is going to be rejected, this committee need to provide reasons for why it's going to be rejected. And the idea that you're just not comfortable with it is not a planning reason for rejecting this. So if those who want to reject it have reason to reject it, then they would need to tell the rest of the committee what it is that they're objecting to and why they're rejecting it. That's planning policies. That's what we're looking for. I haven't heard anybody use a planning policy yet that stacks up and rejects this as a proposal going forward. That's, as I understand it, what we're supposed to do here today. If we reject this, we have to have good reason for doing so.
Councillor Minnie.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose the vote's just been recorded there, but in light of Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Boyle's comments, upon mature reflection, I suppose, if I was asked to make a proposal, I couldn't safely offer any firm proposals to counteract the officer's recommendation. I suppose like Councillor Jackson, on reflection, I just wasn't comfortable. But if I was to translate that on the policy grounds or if they advance any further, I suppose I couldn't. And on my own reflection, I couldn't, like Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Boyd, I don't think I could actually offer any sustainable proposals to counteract the officer's recommendations. So if there's a facility, I can obviously go ahead and I suppose what I'm saying is I'll have to translate and change my own vote on that basis. But just like to put that on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Very well, as member, I'm going to just get some legal advice here. Members, we're going to take a quick adjournment for 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we've had a discussion here on taking legal advice. Do we have another proposal on the floor, please? I see nothing in the chat box and nothing here in the chamber. I'm going to ask for Philip to come in perhaps and give us some advice. Does someone come in there? Dan, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It was on the basis of you're looking for a proposal.
Yes, it is, Dan. We need to get a resolution for this for these people.
Okay, I took my vote, Chair, previously, so I'm against the proposal to approve it. I'm okay with making a proposal to not accept the officer recommendation on the basis that the application is contrary to the area plan. And I just read from 2.5 of page 166 of the area plan, which the woodland provides a strong defining edge to the southeastern edge of Eglinton and acts as a visual buffer to the more open agricultural land along the Ballygodden Road. There will be a strong presumption against development in this area. So my proposal, Chair, is not to accept the officer recommendation on the basis that it's contrary to the area plan.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. We have a seconder, which is Councillor Angela Dobbins. So the proposal is to not accept the recommendation offer on the basis of the contrary to the area plan. Okay, we'll have to go into a vote for this, please, Eamon.
Thank you, Chair. Just go through the roll again. Alderman Breslin.
I wasn't in for the start of it.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey.
Aye, for.
Thank you. Alderman Carrigan.
I'll abstain, Eamon. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman McClintock.
Not here for the whole debate.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Barr.
Here for the start of the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Don't have the area plan in front of me. I'll take Councillor Kelly's word for it, but I'm against anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Dobbins.
For Eamon.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher Jackson. Thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
For Eamon.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Logue.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire. Councillor Philip McKinney. Thank you. Councillor Sean Mooney.
Against.
Thank you. The result of the vote is 6 in favour, 3 against and 1 abstention. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, the proposal is carried. Thank you. Okay, now move on to item number 7, and it's Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 is LA 11 2021 0883F. The proposal is for extension to and reconfiguration of building to accommodate an arts and cultural centre comprising performance space, multi-tuition rooms, dance studio, offices, cafe and ancillary spaces and associated site works. Members will be aware that committee approved a similar development on this site in March of this year. This application is a full planning application, but proposes amendments to the design of the building as previously approved. The amendments include the reduction of internal floor space, pulling the building off number 6 Kennedy Place gable, rearrangement of internal spaces to suit reduction, a change in material to cladding panels, standing seam sink, polycarbonate cladding and render concrete to brick, screening removed at rooftop terrace, windows amended, perforated screen added and curtain walling to the rear reduced, and the site location is at 20 to 22 Hawkins Street and the vacant site to the immediate southwest fronting onto Kennedy Place and Derry, and the recommendation is to approve. So members, the site as shown here in red is a vacant site to the rear of Hawkins Street in the fountain area of the city. The proposal includes the building at 20 to 22 Hawkins Street with an extension on the vacant site. This is just an aerial, excuse me, an aerial view of the site as outlined in red. Members, the building to the left and the right on this slide are existing buildings with a new build extension filling in the vacant gap. The design is contemporary, with the facade being mainly finished in red brick, which has elements protruding to maintain the modern design of the building, but which sits well within the streetscape with the adjacent buildings. Other materials include metal cladding and glazed elements. And this slide demonstrates the elevation of material changes proposed to the development as previously approved, and that's shown at the elevation on the bottom of that slide. The new elevation is on the top. So the scale, height and massing is similar to that as previously approved by members, and the proposed use is still for an arts and cultural centre. So this slide shows the proposed elevation onto Jack Allen Court and also shows the listed building opposite. Historic Environment Division were consulted during the processing of the application and have no objection to the proposed building design and materials with respect to the listed buildings in the vicinity. So this slide shows the proposed development and that's on the top of the slide as compared to the approved building as below. You can just see it's mainly a difference in the materials to be used. So during the processing of the application, officers consulted with historic buildings and historic monuments, and both had no objection to the amended design. Consultation was carried out with DAERA and DFI Roads and Environmental Health on the earlier approved application. Officers are satisfied there are no material changes in this application which required these consultees to be consulted again, and officers have recommended conditions and informatives as previously recommended by these consultees are placed on this new application if approval is to be granted. So during the processing of the application, one representation was received from a neighbour at Jack Allen Court. The representation refers to access to the car park at Jack Allen Court during construction and that daily access is required. It states that Jack Allen Court is sheltered accommodation and consideration must be given to residents of advanced age and with disabilities. Officers do agree that there should be no encroachment or impediments to access to the existing car parking or access for residents in the vicinity of the development during construction or thereafter, and this should be managed appropriately by the developer or contractor on site. So the policy consideration with the application was as detailed fully in the report. It includes a consideration of the RDS, the Derry Area Plan, the SPPS, PPS 2, 3 and 6, and relevant design guides. So in conclusion, members, an application for a similar development was approved by Planning Committee in March 2021. This application is a new application and is being made due to changes to the design and materials of the proposed building. The form, scale and massing is very similar to that previously approved, and the proposed use is still for an arts and cultural centre. The proposal is considered acceptable in that it is in accordance with the area plan and other relevant planning policy, and there will be protection of natural heritage interests, protection of infrastructure and protection of archaeology and built heritage, all in accordance with planning policies. Condition 4, members, was discussed on the 3 members' approval of the last application also, where there was an issue raised just with regards to opening times. So I just wanted to confirm that the previous condition will be repeated on this application. This is a new application, and therefore that condition can be carried over. And that was opening hours are restricted between the hours of 8 and 11 o'clock. And officer's recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions and informatives as set out in the plan report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andre. Councillor Boyle, question for the officer.
I don't have a question, Chair. We looked at this application extensively the last time it came in, and in my view, you know, what we're looking at here are really, for want of a way of putting it, changes that are in some ways superficial, or indeed for the aesthetic nature of the building. HED have been consulted in relation to the nearby listed buildings and are very content with them. Just to repeat, I think something that we all agreed upon with the last application to this, and that is, you know, that a building of this nature will of course enhance the cultural opportunity offering and experience for people who live in the city, but in actual fact also those who may well wish to visit our city and district in years to come. And I wish the applicant well, and simply just to propose that we accept the officer recommendation on this occasion, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Jackson wishes to come in.
Yeah, Councillor Boyle summed it up well there, and I'm just going to come on the back of that and say I'm prepared to second the recommendation. Thank you.
Chief, that we see have an interest there from Councillor Lowe. He's on the Urban Villages Strategy Group. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we have a proposal on the floor here from Councillor Boyle, seconded by Councillor Jackson, to accept the officer's recommendation. I see no objections on the floor and no objections on the chat box, so the proposal is through. Thank you. Andre, do you want to take us through number 8?
Thank you, Chair. Item 8 is LA 11 2021 0884 DCA. The proposal is for alterations to existing building at number 20 to 22 Hawkins Street, involving part removal of walls to facilitate internal reconfiguration and extension to the rear, and demolition of walls on a vacant site. And the location is 20 to 22 Hawkins Street, and the vacant site to the immediate southwest, fronting onto Kennedy Place in Derry. And the recommendation is to grant consent. So members, the site is as indicated in red on the slide, located at Hawkins Street. The site is located within the designated conservation area, and therefore consent for demolition in a conservation area is required. So again, this is just an aerial view. The site is located at the Fountain area in the city. So this slide shows the rear of the existing building at Hawkins Street. That building is to be retained, but the areas in red, as indicated here, to be removed to facilitate the new extension, and the openings that will be required to attach the extension to this building. And this slide shows walls to be demolished on the boundaries of the vacant site to facilitate the new build extension. So the following policies have been considered and detailed in the planning report: the Derry Area Plan, the SPPS and PPS 6, and the relevant design guides. Demolition consent was granted previously by members in March 2021. There are now slight amendments to the previous consent as granted due to a change in the design of the new build, as per the previous application discussed. The proposal is considered acceptable in that it is in accordance with the area plan and other material considerations. There will be protection of the built heritage in accordance with PPS 6, and the officer's recommendation is to grant conservation area consent subject to conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Andre, and Councillor Boyle.
Again, Chair, as above on the previous application, evidently this application had to be changed to fit in with the one that we've just passed. There's not much point having a cart if you haven't got a horse to put in front of it, I suppose. So I will propose that we accept the recommendation.
Councillor, do we have a seconder? Councillor Mooney seconding. Okay. Anybody, any questions for the officer? I see no objections in the chat box and no objections on the floor. Proposal is carried. Thank you. I'm moving on to item 9. Laura, are you going to take that one, please?
Yes, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Application LA11 2021-0588F is for the erection of 10.7 metre high by 6.5 metre wide GA or rugby posts on an existing grass pitch, and 12 metre high by 30 metre long ball stop fencing behind the new posts. And the location is Spamount playing fields from the Bay Road, Spamount, Castledearg, and the recommendation is to approve. So this slide just shows the site location. The site is defined by the red line as the central section of the pitches, which are existing at this location. And as you can see, just the surrounding recreational area there as well. So this slide just shows some detail of the fencing, which is proposed under this application and the location of it. As I said, the posts will be 10.7 metres high by 6.5 metres wide, and the fencing will be 12 metres high by 30 metres wide. So this is just some images of the current facility located there in Spamount. And this is the policy framework under which the application was assessed, which includes the Strabane Area Plan, the SPPS, PPS 3, PPS 8, PPS 15, and PPS 2. So in order to establish the principle of this proposal, it's considered under PPS 8. So policy OS1 states that development will not be permitted, which results in the loss of open space. So this site is on zone land, but clearly open space within Spamount. It was previously used as a refuse tip and was reclaimed to provide these sport and recreation facilities. This, as you can see from the images earlier, has been implemented and known as playing pitches. So this proposal won't remove any of the existing open space or the recreation areas. It will enhance the overall use of the site, and therefore it's considered that the proposal complies with policy OS1 of PPS 8. Just in terms of design, it's also considered under PPS 8. It's considered that the fencing and goalposts won't cause any additional visual intrusion or loss of residential amenity to anyone that lives in the vicinity. As you can see in this image, that the pitch is set slightly below the road level, which will help to obscure the views, and that there's a considerable separation distance between the net and the posts and any of the nearby residential properties. So therefore, it's considered overall the design respects the character and is appropriate in this area. In consideration of PPS 3, there's currently parking provided at the pitch, and there's no amendments under this application proposed. In terms of natural heritage, the site's located approximately 100 metres southeast from the River Dearg. And the SAS have been consulted and advised that due to the location, scale and nature of the proposal, there won't be any effects in the designated sites. In terms of PPS 15, which considers planning and flood risk, there's an area of surface water flooding located along in the northwest section of the site near where some of the goalposts are proposed. DFI Rubbers have advised that it doesn't materially change any flood risk at the site, and given the size and scale of the proposal, a drainage assessment isn't required. There is an undesignated watercourse located within the grounds in the southeast southern area, and they have requested that a 5-metre maintenance strip is provided. This is achievable and can be conditioned on any approval. So therefore it's considered that the proposal complies with PPS 15. And then just in terms of amenity, which is considered in the SPPS, sites currently operating as a sporting facility. So this proposal will not result in any additional impact on amenity of any of the nearby properties. Environmental Health have no objection. They have provided some conditions in terms of any contamination should it be encountered during the works. They put up the goalposts and the fencing, just given the previous history of the site. So overall, it's been demonstrated that the proposal complies with the Estrabon Area Plan, the SPPS, PPS 8, PPS 3, PPS 15 and PPS 2. It won't result in the loss of any existing open space. It won't cause any adverse effect to any residential amenity, and it won't prevent access to the open space or will change flood risk at the site or affect any natural heritage features. Therefore, approval is recommended, subject to the conditions which are set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McGuire, have you a question for the officer? Councillor McGuire? Alderman Hussey, you have a question for the officer?
Not a question. I was going to make a proposal, Chair.
In the absence of Councillor McGuire, Alderman, yes, we'll go ahead with your proposal.
Well, thank you, Chair. I wish to propose the officer's recommendation for approval, but at the same time, I sometimes have to question, do we often over-egg the pudding? What are we talking about? Putting up a couple of sets of goalposts and backstops. It's not the officer's fault. They're tied to policy, but really, I propose the approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. Do we have a seconder?
Chair, could I second that?
Yes, Councillor McGuire, you can second that.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just
Are
to
you
say
okay?
that clubs like Neve Owen and other clubs will find us very welcome, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I see no objections in the chat box and nothing on the floor here. So proposal is, officer's recommendation is passed. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 13, and Maliki is going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Item 13 is L11 2021-0902 LBC. The proposal is for removal of the existing south gable due to structural instability and rebuilding of the same to match dimensions and aesthetic appearance of building 63 Ebrington Square, and the recommendation is to approve. The application is located within the Ebrington Square, Ebrington Complex. The building is number 63 as outlined in the red line here, and also in the overhead view. Probably more familiar with the site from this photograph. It's beside the cafe that's existing, and to the left hand side of the clock tower building when looking from the parade ground. So building 63 is a listed building. Therefore, any works to listed buildings require listed building consent. The proposal applies to the existing gable elevation. So it's basically the removal and rebuild of it due to structural issues. Again, here's the plans. They're outlined in the report and give you the detail of the structural issues. The policy context is set out in the report as well in terms of the main policy consideration we've set out in SPPS and PPS 6 and also within the Dairy Iron Plan in terms of policy BE2. So all listed building consent applications would be statutorily assessed by Historic Environment Division. Historic buildings have no objections to the proposal subject to standard conditions. The materials to be used will follow the existing design and build of the original proposal, and the gable will be dimensionally and aesthetically the same. It's not proposed to rebuild the flue structures, given the likelihood that this will be detrimental to the structural integrity of the new wall. So in summary, this is a LBC application. It's listed. There's a number of listed buildings in the area. This is enabling structural works. They're required to make the building a viable property for any future use or any proposed use at the site. So the recommendation is to approve this listed building consent. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Malachy. And any questions for the officers? Councillor Boyle?
Just simply to make a proposal. Evidently, the application's in front of us because it's in the Ebrington Square area, and it's really about protecting the structural integrity of the buildings, and HED are content with that, and they're the primary consultee in this case. So just to propose the committee, we accept the recommendation.
If that Councillor Boyle, we have Councillor Mooney seconded. So proposal is to accept the officer's recommendation. I see no objections in the chat box and none in the chamber. So the proposal is carried. Thank you. Malachy, would you like us to take us through the number 14, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, item 14 is L11 2021-0949 LBC. This is a listed building consent for enabling works to the clock tower building known as 67, 68, 69 Ebrington Square, including demolition and rebuilding of the gable wall to building 69, installation of lateral ties to cross walls, works to top 2 floors and brickwork of the clock tower, installation of new pad stones, removal and replacement of friable brickwork to the internal walls. Yes, and the subject site is the clock tower building at 67, 68 and 69 Ebrington Square, and the recommendation is to approve. Similar to the last application, this is before you, members, because it's from the Ebrington complex. Probably all familiar with the clock tower building, which is the main building that you see from the parade ground. This photograph here give you a good idea of where it is. And there's probably an older image of the site before previous enabling works. So similar to the application before, the proposal is to carry out essential enabling and improvement works because of structural issues with the existing building in order to make it a viable building for development. And again, I think these images show the location of the friable bricks, the crumbling bricks that are an issue with, in relation to this proposed building. And again, the pink areas will show the areas where new structural works are going to be carried out as part of this listed building consent. And again, here's some detailed drawings of the proposed pad stones and lateral tie-ins, again being added for structural purposes. The policy context, again, Dairy Area Plan, SPPS and PPS 6 are the main considerations. And likewise, we've consulted Historic and Environment Division. Historic buildings have no objections, subject to conditions. They acknowledge the extent of the damage to the brickwork and the instability of the wall means that for safety reasons, the gable wall needs to be removed and rebuilt at building 69. The proposed design is for the floors to be propped up and secured, and for the gable wall to be carefully dismantled and reconstructed to its historic profile. The wall will be of solid construction on a new foundations. The walls to the washroom on the second floor of building 67 are to be carefully demolished due to the structural instability and rebuilt in reclaimed brick and lime mortar. The chimney breast will be taken down to ceiling level and made good, and lateral ties are to be installed at all cross walls on all floors to add structural stability. And again, the recommendation, based on the advice of the Historic Environment Division and consideration of the policy set out before officers, is to approve this listed building consent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Molly. Any questions for the officer? Okay, Councillor Boyle.
Again, Chair, it needs a proposer, I suppose. So again, it's similar reasons as the last application. Again, it's about protecting the structural integrity of the building and giving it a new lease of life, and obviously providing that somebody will be able to use it. And if we weren't to pass this, then there wouldn't be very much point in trying to repair old buildings. And it is an old building. It's been there a very long time, and it's one of the most prominent buildings in the city. And I think we've all come to know and love in the last number of years. Perhaps that wasn't always the case, but it is now. And so I propose we accept the officer recommendation.
Happy to second, Chair Derek.
Derek already had a seconder, which is Councillor Rennie, but thank you for the offer. Okay, so the recommendation is to accept the officer's proposal. I don't see any objections in the chat box, and none in the chair, none in the chamber, so it's passed. I'm now going to suggest we take a quick 10 minutes break and then return back. Thank you. back to it now. We're going to move on to the next item, number 7, which is note of opinion approve Office of Development at Fort George, Dairy Planning Application LA 11-2017-0586 RM, and Andre's going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this paper is to advise members of receipt of a notice of opinion, which was issued from DFI Strategic Planning Director to Council on the 15th of September in relation to a planning application for a proposed 4-storey office development for science and IT-based business, known as Phase 2 at the former Fort George site, Bay Road. The planning application is referenced above as being processed and considered by DFI. So the notice of opinion to approve planning permission was received on the 15th from DFI, 15th of September, sorry. The application is being dealt with as a reserved matters application following the Department's Article 31 approval of the outline planning permission on the Fort George site. And DFI are advising Council of the notice of opinion, and the letter states that if Council wishes to seek an opportunity to appear before and be heard by the Planning Appeals Commission for the purpose of a hearing, then it should make that request in writing within 28 days from the date of the service of the notice. And having viewed the details of the application, the case officer report and the draft notice of opinion, planning officers agree with the notice of opinion to approve and therefore consider there would be no merit for seeking a PAC hearing in respect of this case. So the members are asked to note the contents of the paper and just to advise officers if they wish to make a request for an opportunity to appear before and be heard by the Planning Appeals Commission or a person appointed by the Department for the purpose of a hearing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andre. Any questions? Anyone wish to speak on the matter? Okay, then. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. And certainly don't want to ask Council to appear before the PAC. It's a fantastic development. It's a positive move forward, and we welcome it. Just the Fort George site is something that's is a site that's got great potential, and this is a step towards sort of really realizing that potential. So it's great to see, and again, we touched on it yesterday around businesses having confidence to invest within our city and district. So this is another example of that potential investment. So welcome the development on the site, and happy to propose that we note the contents of the paper. We don't feel it necessary to request a hearing at PAC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Boyle.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And in a similar vein, I mean, it certainly wouldn't make any sense. There would be absolutely no logic in this council appearing before the PAC with any objection to the opinion by a DFA that this accommodation, this office accommodation, could be located in the Fort George site. As Councillor Jackson has rightly pointed out, there's a great ambition for the Fort George site, and there's been much frustration over the last number of years since the site was handed over to a government department to develop, and so therefore fully supportive, and again do note the information coming from officers and coming from the Department for Infrastructure. And I think we could all agree that we look forward to the day when this accommodation is up and ready for habitation, again, because there's great opportunity there for creation of jobs and further prosperity for our people. So again, thank you, Chair.
So we accept the officer's recommendation. I see nothing from the chat box and nothing on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Jackson, for that. Okay, moving on to Item 8, open for information, DFI notification of application direction for LA 1120190263F supermarket at Crescent Link. And Andre's going to take us for that again.
So members, this is just to advise members of receipt of correspondence from the Regional Planning Directorate dated the 21st of September in relation to planning application LA 11-2019-0263F, and that was for the erection of a supermarket at Crescent Link in Derry. The correspondence states that the above application is required to be referred to the department for determination and is accompanied by a section 29 direction. So members will be aware that the application was recommended for approval by members, and because it was a major application and was contrary to the area plan, council was required to notify DFI, and an Article 17 direction order was placed so that council could not issue any decision. So the decision, well, the application has been held by council until we got the letter from DFI on the 21st of September. So that basically states that the department is calling in the application, and it is now responsible for the decision that will be taken on the application. So it's just a paper for information at this stage, and the letters from the Regional Planning Directorate and the Section 29 direction is attached for members' information also. Thank you.
Jackson.
Thanks, Chair. And I just want to take this opportunity to highlight my disappointment that this decision has been taken by DFI. It's my recollection that this committee voted unanimously to erect a legal supermarket on the Crescent Link. And it did so with taking into consideration of all the planning policies. I think we deliberated on it at quite some length around the almost the sequential tests that had been applied, and that there wasn't any suitable alternative sites other than the Crescent Link. And then we did add significant weight to the economic benefits that this would bring to the local area, and I suppose that it would address some of the challenges that exist along that part of the waterside whenever, because there are some businesses that are overtrading, and that's well, I suppose it is frustrating and it's disappointing that that this decision has been taken, the decision's been taken to call it in. And I just want to, because I found it interesting, because it was only earlier this week I watched the DFA minister when responding to a question from Declan McAleer, MLA, around the advice note, the guidance, and the DFA minister very categorically said that councils are the planning authorities in their own right. It's the councils that take the decisions and their interpretation of policy. And then now we've got that minister's own department that's almost ignoring the decision of council and saying that we're going to determine this application ourselves. I think it's a dangerous step in the wrong direction, and it's very worrying and disappointing. And I just hope that that the department add the same weight as this committee has done to the material considerations in regard to this application. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to express my disappointment on it. And I suppose just in terms of a question, is there any further input following the decision that was taken by council? Is there any input from officers in terms of correspondence with the department, or is this completely out of council's hands at this point, and is there any role for council? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Jackson. The letter from the department basically states that there's no right of appeal. So it just instructs us to send the file to DFI for their determination. So there's little we can do, nothing we can do at this stage.
Thank you, Andre. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. And I suppose maybe along the same lines, but it's more to do with the process. And I suppose I'm a bit frustrated that the length of time it takes for the department just to kind of, I suppose, fill out these, what seems to be from the correspondence, very much a statute. There's a statutory framework which is being pointed to at each stage of the way. And I'm curious to know, because the department acknowledged that the correspondence from council was received on the 20th of January, and they've responded now on the 21st of September. So it's taken them 9 months to decide that this is an application that they want to call in. And I just think that's a crazy amount of time for an application to be languishing in the system. We were notified by the head of planning at our committee on the 3rd of March that DFI had a deadline to respond to council by the 10th of March. And I'm just wondering, what kind of deadline is that? Is it a statutory deadline, and how was it missed by so many months? And why were we not advised of what the rationale for that missing that deadline was? There's nothing in the correspondence back from the department calling this in, even to acknowledge the fact that they've gone beyond the deadline, to acknowledge the fact they've taken so long, to acknowledge the fact that this is going to have a consequence for our annual returns in terms of our major applications. And don't forget, this is not the end of the matter. This is just the start of the matter from the point of view of the department, because they've just decided at this stage they're calling it in. They now have to get all the paperwork and review that and assess it, and then make a determination. So this application is still in the system for a lot longer than would normally have been the case if the application had been approved at the time the committee approved it. So I want to just record my frustration at just the length of time. We've seen it before in another application when an Article 17 notice was served, and we had to go and do all sorts, jump through hoops in terms of stuff. And it was sitting there for another 18 months, and an officer just sitting there with applications, and applicants are sitting wondering what the hell's going on, and I'm sitting here wondering what's going on. And I just don't think it's good enough, because if council was sitting on applications in terms of making responses, the department would be pointing the finger very quickly and saying what's going on in dare I say, in Strabane District Council's planning department. They need to get the finger out. And I think it's the same from the mental point of view, from strategic planning. I don't understand why there is this inordinate delay. It takes 9 months to decide that an application, because they don't have the paperwork, they're just going off the basic correspondence from council. It takes them 9 months to decide that, yes, this is something that we want to call in. And I don't think that's good enough. And I also, Chair, think that given what I perceive to be the sort of creeping interference, and this is something that wasn't part or a major feature of our initial training when I came onto the planning committee around these Article 17, Article 29 notices. I think this is something that we need to have included in a future training programme for members of the planning committee, and probably maybe open to council, all council rather than just the planning committee who want to attend. Because it's something that I find frustrating, and it's something I don't understand. And I've read the legislation, and I've read the guidance and stuff on it, and I think it would be useful on the back of what's happening in terms of this role that strategic planning have taken upon themselves over probably the last couple of years, that we would get a little bit of more input or training going down the road. Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, just a frustrated comment.
Thank you.
Oh, I did have a question, Chair, just in relation to the head of planning's comments to the committee. Yeah, just the head of planning's comments to the committee on the 3rd of March. So that's it, the minute P67/21.
Chair, I wonder, could I come in there, please?
Of course you can. Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just firstly, Councillor Kelly, there is no statutory requirement for a response from the department in regard to how long they can take in regards to the notification procedures. I know that this was something that was brought up in the review of legislation with quite a number of heads of planning have raised this issue, and the fact that there is no timeline. But there's certainly, maybe there is some confusion, and apologies if that came on my part, that I've given you a date. I think there might have been an expectation that we thought we would receive something back within a certain period of time normally. But there certainly isn't a statutory requirement, and apologies if I have confused yourselves on that. But just to update you that that wouldn't be the case. I would probably was trying to indicate maybe a rough estimate of when we expected it. But as you know, we still haven't heard back on the other Serban Athletic case at this stage. It's still sitting with no response. And on quite a few occasions, we did actually contact correspondence from the planning committee asking for a response, and we have yet to receive one in regards to that. So hopefully that responds, we can hear what you're saying, and as I say, heads of planning have referred to this issue a few times at SPG as well to the chief planner in regards to this. And as you know, I've personally contacted them quite a few times to get some sort of response to proceed with applications, because as you've explained yourself in the past, Councillor Kelly, whilst the application sits and may be returned to us, the processing time then still remains with council. But this application now will be called in and will be determined by the department. So hopefully that as a response, Chair, to Councillor Kelly's concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. And I mean, I would agree with the comments by Councillor Jackson and Councillor Kelly. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that we had to wait 9 months to get a reply. We've no right of appeal, and we also should make note of the training matters which Councillor Kelly rightly raised. Thank you. Any other comments on the matter? Okay, we'll move on to item 9, and Susan's going to take us through that, and that is the planning appeals update, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to update you members, you'll see through the paper that we had no new appeals submitted. We have had one enforcement appeal withdrawn and no decisions since last committee. And we have updated the appeal schedule for you, and so I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I see no questions in the chat box and none on the floor here. We'll move on to item 10, which is the enforcement update, and Kieran is going to brief us on that.
I can come in there, members.
Sorry, my apologies. I see Keith Carrigan has come up in the chat box. Keith, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. Thanks for letting me in. I think I'm on the right one here, Chair. I was just wondering there. It's in regards to. Oh, sorry. It's one of these ones that are in grey, Suzanne. It is number 13 on the list, and that's on the Derg Road and Victoria Bridge outside Archdraw there, LA 11 2016 0223 CA, and it's in regards to the enforcement notice appeal. And I'm just wondering, I know it stated there was a hearing 9th of January 2020 at the Ban Enterprise. I'm just wondering, any inclination as to a time frame? It's just saying await decision, and a deeming that it is ongoing. Have we any inclination as to when we might get word on that one?
No, we haven't, Councillor Kerrigan. Unfortunately, we just have to wait on these, and that's just the way it is at the moment. I mean, the appeal on the planning application is waiting to be heard on that site. That's the actual appeal on the enforcement notice. So we just have to wait.
No, that's grand. That's grand. I was just checking that. Thanks very much, Suzanne. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else wish to speak on the subject?
Chair, did you see my name there?
Just seen it there, Dan. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's more of a general question in terms of appeals, and I appreciate the PAC is entirely out with the control of council, but I'm just wondering that with the COVID and the pandemic measures that were introduced by the PAC and the delays that were brought in terms of hearing appeals, has there any update from the PAC in terms of where they're at now? Have they started doing site visits and what have you again? Are they started doing the hearings, or are they still the huge backlog that seemed to be in place sort of earlier in the year?
Through the chair, I can respond to Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kelly, they did issue an update on their remote protocol. It's on their website. I went through it last week. They haven't started informal site visits yet. They have started physical hearings in Park House, and those are usually in the form of a hybrid hearing to allow for anybody who might have to, who can't attend at the last minute. As council now, we have only been involved in remote hearings to date, but it does seem to be picking up in terms of pace and dates, and actually requests for submissions of statements of case. We have a couple away last week, and the one due next week. So they are picking up, but their position is quite clear on their publication that they are having delays.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Any more questions for Suzanne? Okay, I'll move on to Kieran there for enforcement. Kieran, if you give us a brief, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. The paper in front of committee members today is just the enforcement report, which is a brief update for the 2020-21 business year. I'll just give a quick run through on it. As I say, it's in front of members here. In relation to enforcement powers are set out in Part 5 of the Planning Act. And for enforcement, we have one target for the year, which is a closure of 70% of cases within 39 weeks. In relation to enforcement itself in this section, for light caseloads, we started the year with 264 cases on the 1st April, with the caseload numbers steadily dropping through the year, which ended up at 214 at the end of March 2021, which was a good drop in numbers. In terms of new cases for the year, we had a slight increase in new cases from the previous business year when we received 171 new cases. For the 2020-21 business year, the section received a total of 188 cases for the year. With the breakdown of those cases received in terms of the quarters shown in Table 2, which showed we received 36 in the first quarter, 39 in the second, and 36 in the third, with a steep increase then in the fourth quarter with 77 cases received in the section. In relation to closures then for the year, for the 2020-21 business year, the section closed 199 cases, which was an increase from the previous year when we closed 176. For the 2021 business year, 67 were not expedient pursuits, 63 had no breach, 15 were granted permission, and 31 were found to be, 31 were remedied and resolved, and 23 were found to be immune from enforcement action when officers investigated. For this year, for this business year past, the section exceeded the enforcement target of closing 70% of cases within 39 weeks. The section achieved a closure rate of 73.3%. This is a reduction from the previous year when we achieved 78%, but it was done against the backdrop of COVID, which made it difficult at the beginning of the year to get out and look at sites. And when we take the section's performance against Northern Ireland as a whole, we're above the Northern Ireland average, which is 69.9%. In relation then to notices served for the year, we served 17. And of these 17, 4 of them were enforcement notices. And again, this is a reduction from the previous year when we served 23 notices on site. And then just for appeals, for the 2020-21 business year, we had 10 ongoing appeals. 3 of these were partially heard on the legal grounds, but we're still awaiting dates on the further hearings for those. 3 were heard via remote hearings, with decisions outstanding on 2 and 1 decision issued, which we upheld the notice, and then we're awaiting dates on the other On the other appeals, we do have as well 2 of them ongoing at the moment, or 2 additional ones, which are for EIA appeals, which are ongoing. Just in relation to court then for the year, committee members have cleared 4 cases for court, which are ongoing now. They've passed the Phillips team. And then just in relation, I've not included in the paper, and I should have done, just in relation to court fines then for the year, we've had 2 cases to court where we've had successful fines, one totaling 7,500 and the other totaling 2,500 for non-compliance with enforcement notices. So we're ongoing with them now to get them full compliance, and if say they're not complied with, then we'll be returning to committee with them seeking further action. And that's just a brief update, members.
Any questions for Kieran, members? Okay, I see nothing in the chat box and nothing in the chamber. We're going to move on to item 11, list of decisions issued. Can we take it as read? I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay, I propose we go into confidential. Councillor Boyd proposed, second by Councillor Mooney. Can we go into confidential, please?